Once a giant, always a giant. For me, it's only a giant.
What's going on YouTube? DU546. Definitely hit that subscribe button if you're new. Like the video if you like the video. And I won't tell if you click that bell. Let's go ahead and get into this. All right, so the dust is settling and the Giants are in full swing of their GM search. I wanted to talk about some of my top candidates. And by the way, all of these candidates in this video, the Giants have placed interviews. They've placed requests to do interviews. Just to go over the list really quick, Joe Schoen, Assistant GM, Buffalo Bills. Adam Peters, Assistant GM, 49ers. Joe Hortiz, Ravens Director of Player Personnel. Ryan Poles, Chiefs Executive Director of Player Personnel. Adrian Wilson, Cardinals VP of Pro Personnel. And then Quentin Harris works right under Adrian Wilson. So I'm not going to go too deep into Quentin Harris because he works under Adrian Wilson. And I think if they like Adrian Wilson, they'll hire him and Quentin Harris will come along. So I want to start this off. I'm going to kind of rank them. Joe Schoen is the assistant GM of the Buffalo Bills. 20 years of experience as far as scouting goes. Works with Brandon Beane. Brandon Beane right now is one of the more respected GMs in the NFL. They wanted him in Carolina, but he left. He did work under Gettleman for a little while, but he left, went to the Buffalo Bills, and ever since he's gotten there, they've gotten better and better every year. And guess who went there with him? Joe Schoen. Joe Schoen has been his right-hand man since he got there, pretty much been in that assistant GM role. So I'm not going to give him all the credit, but he deserves a lot of the credit. I mean, they've gotten guys like Josh Allen. They've gotten guys like Tre'Davious White, traded for Stephon Diggs. Really good cornerstone pieces of their franchise. They've been able to address. They've been able to fill out that Bills roster with really competitive players. And they only seem to be getting better and better every year. They're picking at the end of the first round these days, and they're still getting good players. Greg Rousseau, I was a big critic of him, but I thought that if he went to the Bills, I thought that it was just a perfect situation with the way the Bills run their defense, especially since it's a 4-3. I thought it would be a perfect situation, and it's worked out really well for Greg Rousseau. He looks like he's going to be a good player for them. So Joe Schoen is my number one option, only because he comes with the package deal of maybe bringing along Brian Daboll, which of course is the Bills offensive coordinator, done a lot of great work with Josh Allen. And I think I'm not expecting him to turn around Daniel Jones, but even if he's not able to do that, I want an offensive coordinator with experience that has experience developing young quarterbacks. And if we were to take a young quarterback like Malik Willis with a ton of athletic tools, he will be in good hands because Brian Daboll just got finished developing another young quarterback with all the tools in the world. So that's why he edges out Adam Peters, who I have for number 2, as the number 1 candidate that I'm looking for the Giants to sign. He also has a Bill Parcells connection. He worked with him in Miami a couple of years ago. Pretty much a well-rounded candidate who's been at different spots, prioritizes drafting players. Shout out to Talking Giants. Justin over there did a great job on Adam Peters and Joe Schoen covering what they do. But Joe Schoen pretty much values drafting players no matter the scheme to be able to fit in pretty much any scheme over just drafting players for scheme fits. Now, when we get to number 2, Adam Peters values drafting players that specifically fit the scheme. And of course, that makes sense when you have someone like Kyle Shanahan there. When you have a Kyle Shanahan, you want players that fit his scheme because it's one of the better schemes in the entirety of the NFL. Now, the package deal with Adam Peters would be Matt McDaniel. And I'm not 100% sure that he will be bringing Matt McDaniel because he is a young coach. He's been the offensive coordinator for 1 year, but he's been with Kyle Shanahan for a number of years, and he's really soaked up a lot of knowledge with him. And I think that this dude is a real football savant. So he's a guy to look out for. Maybe he doesn't get a head coaching job this year, maybe not next year, but he's a guy that I'm looking out for because he really looks like the next, Sean McVay football genius. Now, speaking of football geniuses, Adam Peters is also looked at as a football genius. They call him the best evaluator of talent in the entirety of the NFL. Now, just to go over some of the players that he's taken, which is mind-boggling. Now, some of these players are high picks, but it's still very impressive that he's been able to hit on this many really great players. Von Miller, CJ Anderson, Chris Harris Jr., who was undrafted, by the way, Malik Jackson, George Kittle for the 49ers, Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa. He traded for Trent Williams. A lot more players there along that 49ers defensive line and offensive line. They have a lot of good players there, and they've really done a great job. I mean, you look at the 49ers, they're strong on either side of the line. Both of their lines are really why they end up winning a ton of games, which is why last year the Giants got blown out by the 49ers B team, because they have so much depth on both of those lines that they can really rotate guys in and out of these positions and still be very productive as a team. So Adam Peters, as far as scouting goes, as far as talent evaluation goes, I don't really see him anybody being ranked over him as far as that goes. The only difference between him and Joe Schoen is, again, I'm not sure if he's going to bring as good of a head coach as Joe Schoen probably brings from Buffalo. So moving on to Joe Hortiz, who I have ranked number 3. Ed Dodds would be here at number 3 because the Colts have the most Pro Bowlers in the league. I think that he's a good talent evaluator, but the Giants have not put in a request to interview him, so I'm not going to worry about that. So Joe Hortiz is ranked number 3. Of course, he's the Ravens director of player personnel. He's been with the Ravens since 1998. Now look and think, how long have the Ravens really been around? Not that much longer than 1998. Haloti Ngata, Marshall Yanda, Lamar Jackson, Ladarius Webb. That's a good cornerback that was there for a while. Flacco, Suggs, Orlando Brown. I'm thinking of some other corners. There's a couple of other corners. Cannot remember that dude's name. Marlon Humphrey? He's a Raven. I'm pretty sure he was drafted. For the Ravens. But nonetheless, Joe Hortiz has come up from a scout in 1998. And you think about it, he's been with pretty much what everybody considers the best GM of all time, Ozzie Newsome. He's been with him for about 15 years, 17 years until he retired. And he grew up pretty much in that Ravens system. And we usually call the Ravens GM, the Ravens front office, the standard for the NFL. So he's coming from pretty much front office royalty. There's not much more to say there. He's grown up in a great tree of GMs, of front office staffs, and I'm pretty sure everybody in the league is looking to get their hands on somebody from that staff. So Joe Hortiz, a lot of pedigree, a lot of great players that he's been involved in either scouting or making a decision to select. He has a bunch of videos if you have some time to look him up and watch him talk about how he evaluates talent. Watch him talk about how that talent aligns with his coaches. Really smart guy. Check him out. He's number 3 on my list. Now I want to move to Ryan Poles. Ryan Poles is the same level as everybody else on this list. I would say that Joe Schoen and Adam Peters are a step above, but Joe Hortiz and Ryan Poles are very, very close. They're a very close 3 and 4. They're on that tier, like half a step below the first 2. And I would say that Ryan Poles, he's the Chiefs executive director of player personnel. And this guy has been on the Chiefs for the past 13 years in their scouting department. He's been involved in, of course, in their Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Of course, he was part of making that deal to get Patrick Mahomes in that draft. He's I'm pretty sure part of the Kelsey draft. Pretty sure he's definitely part of the Tyreek Hill draft. Pretty much the roster that is terrorizing the league for the Chiefs, Ryan Poles has seen from the beginning to right now. They just turned their entire offensive line around in one offseason. They flipped 5 starters. We might need to flip 4 starters. So what better guy to bring in as the Giants GM than a guy who just was part of a team that had to flip 5 starters on the offensive line and do it at a high level. He got 5 new starters, and they really played well. They had their struggles at the beginning of the season, but they eventually settled in, and they look like one of the better lines in the league. Now, if he could do that for the Giants, we have a ton of weapons around this offensive line that could possibly start to do much better when they actually have people up front blocking and running the ball for them. So Ryan Poles is someone I'm definitely keeping an eye on, and he was just interviewed either today or yesterday. But he's already been interviewed by the Giants. By the way, Joe Schoen was interviewed by the Giants. They said he crushed the interview. Now, next up, we have Adrian Wilson. I'm not even going to really cover Quentin Harris. He's another former player. But again, I don't think that he'll be hired as general manager. But Adrian Wilson does have a shot at being hired as general manager. Now, I'm not as high on him as I am the rest of these people, but he is a former player, former safety. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people remember Adrian Wilson when he was a safety as a Cardinal, and he was a pretty good player. Wasn't a Hall of Famer, but he was a 12-year player, and that counts for something as far as being able to evaluate talent, especially in the secondary, especially on defense. You'd think that he would be able to do that. So he's been in the scouting department for them for 7 years. He's worked his way all the way up to VP of Pro Personnel, which is no small task. And you look at the Cardinals roster, a lot better than the Giants roster. I think that he's been involved in a ton of these moves as far as getting Kyler Murray, which you could probably say is mostly a Cliff Kingsbury thing. But guys like Marcus Golden, guys like trading for DeAndre Hopkins, all of these moves that were made to get the Cardinals to where they are, a ton of good receivers, I think, Christian Kirk, a ton of good players that they have there that are able to help them win games on a weekly basis. Of course, Kyler Murray is driving the engine, but they have a ton of good players there on the Cardinals that Adrian Wilson was part of putting this roster together. So he's number 5 on this list, along with Quentin Harris, I guess, as a package deal along with him. But I wouldn't really look to him as my top option. Now, as far as looking at the coaches that would come along with these GM candidates, again, Joe Schoen would probably bring along Brian Dable, offensive coordinator for the Bills. Wink Martindale could be one of the top candidates to come with Joe Hortiz if he were to come up from the Ravens. And Wink Martindale is a defensive guy. I'm looking for an offensive guy because it's an offensive league, and no one has struggled more than the Giants on offense the last couple of years. But if Wink Martindale is able to get a good offensive coach, I think he might have the potential to be a head coach, but I'm just not sure if he's going to ever be a good head coach. He seems like one of those guys who can be a good defensive coordinator for a long time, but they usually start to struggle once they take that step up to head coach. And then Matt McDaniel, one of the brightest young minds in this league, I believe. You watch his press conferences, you learn things. He does a lot of out-of-the-box things. And you can tell it's just not one of those just positions that they just throw in there and they just say he's an offensive coordinator, but he's not really doing anything. You can tell that he's doing things by the way he answers these questions, by the way he talked about how he designed some of these plays. I think Matt McDaniel could possibly be one of the better coaches in this league. It's just about, do you think that he has enough experience with only being an offensive coordinator for a year, only not calling plays as that offensive coordinator. So if you were to hire him as head coach of the Giants, yes, you would have that offensive mind that I think is brilliant, but he's never called plays before, which you would want him to do as an offensive coordinator for the Giants, and he has never been a head coach before. So those are 2 firsts that you will be throwing on to him, and I'm not sure if, no matter how smart he is, I'm not sure if that will work out too well for him. So we'll see how that goes, but I'm not sure, and I'm pretty sure he'll be hired soon. He might be hired this season, he might be hired next season, but he's an intriguing young mind that you would definitely look to. I think he's only 37. We just hired another young coach, so I'm not sure if John Mara will be all ready for that. But if Adam Peters, the GM coming over for the 49ers, if we hired him, insisted that we took him, I think we might be able to make that happen. But as far as that goes, Eric Bieniemy probably will want to come over with Ryan Poles from the Chiefs. Those are the connections that you have as far as inside tracks on some of these coaches you might be interested in. But those are pretty much the things that pop into mind. There's no one on the Cardinals that you will really look to say, I want that guy as head coach. So you lose out on that benefit of having an inside track on a head coach if you were to hire an Adrian Wilson. But I do think that all of these candidates and everybody that the Giants are interested in could possibly be our GMs long term, could be good GMs. And you guys let me know what you're thinking of the guys that I've covered. Again, if you want a deeper dive, Joe Schoen and Adam Peters have already been covered over there on Talking Giants. I think they're going to do Joe Hortiz next, and they do a real deep dive. Check them out. But let me know who you're thinking is going to be the next GM, and tell me who you want as the next GM. and tell me who you want as the new head coach. If you made it this deep into the video, come on, just hit the subscribe button. I make Giants content primarily, draft content secondarily, and during the season, I'm going to be doing a lot of reacting to pretty much most of the NFL games and everything NFL. So if you made it this deep, go ahead and join the D6 squad.